3D in CAD starts with extruding objects from 2 dimensions. So let's start by just drawing a couple two-dimensional objects. This is going to turn into a bolt. So we're just going to make a circle for the center and grab a polygon. For all of these, just keep reading that command line and do what the command line tells you. Make sure you're familiar with everything over here in the nav bar. Remember, if you just hover your cursor over it a little bit, it gives you a description. I'm pushing on the wheel button of my mouse to do this. Okay, let's draw. This is going to turn into just a pot for cooking some spaghetti or something in. I'm moving my user coordinate system over to recenter it. You have to tell it the new origin and then also where the X and the Y axis are going to be aligned. Moving your user coordinate system around, UCS, that's another thing you'll have to get used to in CAD. Think about the easiest way to make one of these pots. And we'll just move this over again to recenter it. And I'm going to make the outside edge of our cooking pot. Center another circle at the origin, and we'll just pop that radius out a little bit so now we have the edge of our pan. To make the handles, I'm going to make sure that my grid snap is on. Bright blue down at the very bottom, and with the grid snap on, I'm just making a rectangle. Upper left-hand corner to lower right, and now we're going to fillet the corners of this rectangle. There's a couple different ways to fillet. Polyline will select the entire rectangle and do all 4 corners at once. Then set the radius of the fillet on there, and I can now select the entire rectangle and all 4 corners get curved at once. Next, I'm going to use the offset command. So just OFFSET. You define how thick you want your wall to be, and it'll take a line and make another line that's just parallel to the first. You just pull it in or out wherever you want it and hit enter when we're done with offset. Next, we're going to trim. Enter selects all, and that means you can just come in here and select each little piece. It'll show you what you're deleting before you click on it. So you just hover over the piece of the line you don't want and left mouse click, and then it'll disappear. So there's a good start for our spaghetti pot. Next, let's make a chess piece. This is going to be created with the Revolve command. So we're going to take a 2D section and then revolve it around. Let's start by scooching over into a new work area. So I'm moving everything over. UCS. I'm going to start up the user coordinate system, hit a new origin, moving it over 10, and now this is where I want my x-axis and y-axis up. So now I have a new center for my drawing. Okay, pressing down on my rolling mouse key to pan that over, and we'll make a chess pawn. You don't need to copy exactly what I'm doing here. I like to do a Google image search and just pull up an image of something similar to what I'm trying to make and have that on. I actually have 2 screens here, so I'm looking at an image of a pawn on my other screen while I'm sketching this out. Play around with it. Don't try and worry about making anything exact yet. So I'm actually going to turn off some snapping tools here and just eyeball this thing. And for something like a chess pawn, that doesn't have to be exact. Remember, there's a couple different snapping tools. There's snap to your grid, and then there's also snap to objects. So play around with those snapping tools and try out, get real comfortable using all those 2D drawing tools. Let's see here. If you hit the arrow, you can see what you're snapped to, and then clicking on the objects, if they're not blue, it's off. So I just turn the snap off. For this arc, when you're connecting objects, sometimes it's good to actually overlap it a little bit and then trim it away, and then you're sure that those corners come together. For the trim command, enter selects all. Make sure you select all. Otherwise, you have to define cutting planes, and it's a real pain. Actually, the new trim command is a big improvement on this new version of CAD than what it used to be. So be happy that the trim command has that little select all option for you. Okay, so just play around with this, and yeah, it doesn't have to look exactly like mine. Keep it simple, but something fun. I'm going to do a center line, and this center line is eventually what we're going to revolve it around to turn it into a 3D object. One funny thing about the trim command, if something is completely by itself, delete rather than trim it. Okay, so there's part of a pawn. Here's a little hidden trick. Right now we have all of these individual little line segments. So you can select, escape, select. You see each little piece of line is separate, and we want them all joined together. Type join, J-O-I-N, and we're going to walk around this loop and make sure we just have one line instead of 100 different lines. And this is going to make it a lot easier in the future when we use the revolve command. If you're ever not able to extrude something or revolve it or turn it into a 3D object, it's probably because some little corner somewhere isn't quite lined up, or maybe you have two lines that are right on top of one another and you can't even tell by looking at it which corner is not lined up or which. So the join command in 2D, this will allow you to just walk around the edge of it and make sure you just have one line and that it is a continuous line and all the little corners are lined up. So at the very end of it, you should be able to select it and the entire thing highlights together. That means it's all joined together. Next thing we're going to do is design a closet rod bracket, and our brackets at home have been breaking, those cheap plastic things, so we're going to add in a couple more supports around the edge. Okay, back to CAD. I'm just going to zoom out and reorient. There's everything we've created so far. You know the routine. We're going to move our user coordinate system, UCS, specify new origin. I'm going to bump it over 10 again. Make sure you have your ortho snap on down here, this perpendicular snap. If you don't get your new coordinate system oriented just right, it's going to be a real pain to get everything aligned afterwards if it's off just like 1 degree or something. So put that ortho snap on and make sure your coordinate system is where you want it to be. Next thing we're going to do is just start up our circle command again. So I'm going to make a circle at 0, 0 and diameter of 2. I'm going to go ahead and start up the offset command. I want to make this nice and sturdy, so I'm going to bump that out just a little bit thicker than we had it before. And another offset. I'll grab that center one. Okay, so that's going to be the rim and the outside of that bracket. Next, let's put some ribs on here. I'm going to overcomplicate this just to show you a few more drawing tools. I'm going to start with a simple rectangle. There's all your snapping tools. Make sure you have those set to what they want to be. So rectangle, this will let me snap to the center, and I'm only making half of this rib right now so that I can show you the mirror command, and then we can review the trim and the join tools after this too. Okay, so I want that mirrored across, so you just select the object you want to mirror, and then you're going to make 2 points for your mirror line. So that's a line you're copying it across. Just keep reading the command line for all these guys, and remember you can get an animation and a description for each of those tools if you just hover over it. Okay, so I'm trimming out that center line, and I don't want 2 rectangles, I want just 1. So the next thing we're going to do is join those lines together. Just walk around the edge. So there's my first rectangle, enter, and then click on my second rectangle. To zoom in and out, I'm just using the wheel button on my mouse. Make sure you have a mouse that has a wheel button on it. because that makes life a lot easier. Next, let's try out one of the arrays. Now there's rectangular arrays and polar arrays, path arrays. Again, just hover your cursor over it and it'll come up with a description. Be patient, and then it will actually animate what it does. So the new array in this new AutoCAD version is actually quite nice. So I'm going to select my rectangle. Where's the center of my array? There's the center, and an entire new ribbon pops up here. How many objects do I want in it? So I just want 4 objects and 1 row. And there you go. There's all my rectangles that have been copied across. Okay, so there we go. Here's a bunch of 2D objects, and the next step is going to take all of these guys and extrude them into 3D, and this will give us a chance to really explore all the different 3D options we have. To open up your 3D tools, go to the very bottom, find that little guy looks like a gear, and we're going to jump into 3D modeling. If you ever want your 2D tools back, you can just go back to the 2D drafting. Walk through these tools from the left to the right and just hover your cursor over each one, get a feeling for it. So these first objects, this is to draw the 3D object just from scratch. Next is extruding 2D drawings into 3D. You can extrude it up. Loft command, if you define a bunch of cross sections, you can get some nice organic shapes with that. Revolve, that's what we'll use for the pond that we're making, so you have an axis that you revolve it around. Sweep is great for making pipe systems. We'll use that for our bolt too. Check out all of the editing tools. Union is like join. If you want to make 2 things into 1 thing, so you can subtract as well as add, so you can carve holes into things. Intersect is something that isn't in Inventor and some of the other programs that I wish they would have too. It's pretty nice. You can thicken edges. So just walk through each of these little tools, look at the descriptions, and know everything that's in your toolbox. 3D polylines, those are a little tricky to use, but can be handy. Extra hidden tools, if you click around a little bit more. Here's the helix. We'll use that for the bolt as well. Also become familiar with all your modify tools, so rotating and moving 3D objects. Fillet and edge instead of just the corner. So there's a 3D version of just about every 2D version command that's out there. So really just start at the left and work your way to the right and become familiar with everything in at least that leftmost chunk of this new ribbon. In our 3D modeling space, we also have some additional viewing options. We have this view cube up here in the corner. So check that out. We've got some different wireframe or solid view options over here that we can explore to play around with your nav bar. Also, try out some shortcut keys. If you push on your rolling button and push on your shift key at the same time, and then move your mouse around. So shift key, push on rolling button, and move your mouse around. You can rotate around those 3D views. Rolling your mouse button zooms in and out. So try zooming in and zooming out, as well as rotating just with your mouse without having to actually click anything in the nav bar. Let's try out the extrude button. Again, just hover your cursor over it, look at that description. So what we're going to do is first select our 2D drawing and then we will extrude it. Now there's a couple different modes here. You can extrude as a solid or a surface. I'm going to extrude as a solid first. Just tug it in the direction you want it to go in. So I'm rotating with shift key and pushing down on my rolling button. So get it going in the way that you want to extrude in, so it is extruding up. Also play around with your different views. So sometimes the solid view is a little bit more descriptive than that 2D wireframe. Next, I'm going to extrude this as a surface instead of a solid, just so you can see what that looks like. You want to avoid extruding as a surface. Usually this is not a solid object and it's really hard to modify and manipulate. If your lines are not connected together, it will default to extruding as a surface. That's what that surface looks like in a 2D wireframe, so you can tell what you have. Make sure that you're not extruding as a surface. I'm going to go up to my Edit Undo. You can actually choose how many items to undo up there. Okay, so we're going to redo that extrude and make sure that this is a solid, not a surface. And we're going to pull it down, so I'm going to say negative. We'll bring it down, -1. Okay, so there's the extrude. So you have solid or surface. You can change how you view it. Get used to the new navigation tools to rotate around your object. Next, let's scroll on over and find the pond that we made. And for this little guy over here, we're going to try out the Revolve command. Come over to your Extrude tools and just take a look at the description underneath that Revolve command. So we need to select our 2D object and then define the axis. Again, this has a solid or surface. Make sure that mode is set to solid. Select the object, enter, and then we're going to draw our axis. Now for this, you can define the axis as the X and Y axis. Let me just turn off my ortho snap so you can see what we're doing. So we're drawing a line and it's going to revolve it around that line. And then you can just drag it by hand, but it's better to actually type in an angle or hit enter and it automatically gives us 360. Now this guy is on its side, right? So if we come around and look at it, we want to rotate this object. So let's try out some of that 3D modify tools and 3D drawing. Up here there's this little ball, 3D rotate ball. So let's grab that 3D rotate, or you can just type in 3D rotate and follow the directions in the command line. First we need an origin. I'm going to click on the origin, and next we're going to choose a rotation axis. Now it's a little bit disorienting to choose that axis. I want to revolve it around the red axis. So I'm going to hover over the red circle and you can see the axis it's going to rotate around. Again, type in that angle, don't just eyeball it. So I typed in 90 degrees and rotated it around the red X axis. Let's head on over to our cooking pot next. Zoom in on that by rolling your mouse button. I'm going to zoom way in and show you one more way to extrude it. This is, instead of the extrude that we did last time, I'm going to use press pull. And it's over kind of where the other extrusion tools are, or you can type in press pull. There's a couple different ways to select it, the edge or the center. For this one, you're going to select inside of the area you want to pull up. If you select the edge, you'll get a surface. If you grab the center of it, you get your solid. So press pull, you select inside a bound area and then tug up or down. The neat thing about press pull is you can rotate around your object and grab any surface you want and pull it around. Just make sure you're grabbing inside a bound area and not an edge, so you get a solid and not a surface. So see how I grabbed inside and not on the edge? And you can pull this up or down. You can actually create holes with this as well as solids. So there's the base of our cooking pot. Next, let's come up here and maybe grab the handles. So remember how far up you pulled this on each side so you can make it symmetrical. I'm going to pull this up, I don't know, just ½ an inch. We can also go around and fill at the edges after we're done creating our solid too, just to make it look a little bit prettier. Okay, after you've done this, so each solid was done as an individual piece. If I click on part of it, you'll see the entire thing isn't highlighting together. So these are not connected to one another. If I move one piece, it won't move together. So I'm going to use the union command. This is similar to join. It's the 3D version of join. So to turn this into one solid chunk, just start the union command, select all the pieces you want to join together, hit enter, and now when you select it, everything should highlight together. So now everything is connected. The next thing we need to do is put a bottom on this pot. Now, the original line we drew was way up high, but we can still press pull it around. I'm going to press pull that line all the way down so that now it's a bottom. But that's going to fill the entire pot up with a solid. So I'll do this in 2 steps. So I filled it all the way into the bottom, and now I'm going to push it down. If you push instead of pull, pushing into something actually creates a hole. And so I just pushed the top back down so we have a hollow pot again. Let's see, you can look at the 2D wireframe version to make sure that we have kind of a good edge on that bottom. Sometimes it's nice to go back and forth between those different views. And I have multiple solids going on again. So just to clean it up a little bit, let's go ahead and grab that union tool up there again and turn that all into one solid piece again. Okay, we've got one solid piece. We have a solid and we have some drawing object. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that original line that we had in there. So we don't need the line. We also can get rid of the lines for the handles. If you select right to left, it selects everything it touches. If you start on the left-hand side and move to the right, it's only what's entirely inside of there. So that's the easy way to select the lines for the handles and delete them out. So now we just have a solid, and we've gotten rid of all the lines that we originally used to build that solid with. Next, let's see if we can find the 3D fillet command. Now, looking around under the Home tab, I'm not seeing it. It's not the taper. I'm going to go ahead to the Solid Editing tab. There it is. Okay, so there's Fillet Edge, which is curved, or chamfer, which is straight. So we'll go with fillet. Again, you can see what it does. So it takes that edge and just kind of curves it a little bit. Okay, so start up the command, set the radius of curvature. I'm going to pick some little teeny number. If it won't fill it, the radius is probably too large. Try it with a smaller radius and then it should work. Grab your edge. It gives you a preview of it. Hit enter to accept the fillet, and there you go. Now we have a nice rounded edge on there. Hitting enter brings up the previous command, so you don't have to type it in again. You just hit enter. It remembers the original radius you had in there and everything, so you don't have to redefine it if you're not changing it. Let's go ahead and fillet that base with the same radius that we used at the top. Okay, so everything's nice and curved now. If we walk around the handles, we're going to need a smaller radius for the handles, otherwise it won't do it. So I'll make a teeny radius for the handles, and this has all kinds of little chunks on it, so make sure you grab each of those. Just walking around the edge here. If you have a lot of things to fillet, just try one little piece at a time, because chances are one of these little pieces is going to fight you. So if you just do it in small chunks, you'll have better luck with it. Something interesting, if I fillet where these two come together, do you see what it's doing here? So it's actually pulling the material up a little bit instead of pushing it down. So that just gives a nicer finish to everything. Let's try to move this guy around. The pot is kind of lower than everything else, so I'm going to go back to the Home tab and open up our Move tool, 3D Move. In 2D it's just Move, in 3D it's 3D Move. So first we're going to select our object, enter, And we get this coordinate system. Now you can just drag it by hand or click on the axis in the direction. So I wanted to move it up, so I clicked on the Z-axis, and you can drag it up and down, or you can actually type in a number if you know how far up you want to move it. So that just raised the pot up a little bit so that if you compare it to everything else, now it's kind of at the same level, a little bit better. Okay, next let's come over here and play around with our bracket. The easiest way to do this is probably going to be that press pull command. I'm going to grab the entire base. Now if I just click on part of it, I might not grab all of it. This is where you're going to use multiple. Just type in M or click on multiple, and you can walk around and click on multiple areas if you want to grab all of these pieces together and pull them all to the same height. And this is easier than clicking and doing these individually. So now we've got everything selected, so we can pull everything together, and we're just going to make a base for this thing. Safer to type in a number than to just tug it by hand. So there's the base. Now let's walk around and pull up that inside of the brace. So again, we don't want just one piece, we want everything. So M allows us to select multiple pieces at once. Be real careful how you select this. Again, make sure you're getting the right surface. Zoom in on it if you need to. I should probably be zooming in here. Okay, so we're walking around the edge. Enter. Oh, didn't get it all, but okay, so I'm going to set the height to 1. And that's going to pull the edge around. I'm going to run in and grab that last little piece in there. So there we go. There's the edge of our guy. Now this is all in different pieces, so good practice to get in the habit of using the union command. Otherwise you'll forget and move something and it'll be scattered in little pieces all over. So just get in the habit of chunking all that together with the union command. So now I can select it and everything is connected on there. For the last little chunk, these ribs, I'm going to use the 3D objects they already have. So there's a little wedge object on here that'll be great for making those ribs around there. Pay attention to the order of clicking on this thing. I'm also going to change it back to the 2D wireframe so I can see what we originally drew for where that should be. Now once again, look at the order, because if you don't get it right, it'll pull the wrong side up. So lower left, upper right, and then up. Okay, so I'm going to grab one of these guys, lower left, upper right, and then up, and I'm using the snapping tools to pull it into just the right place. Okay, so there's one of them done. Let's go ahead and try out a polar array. So the polar array, that can work for 3-dimensional objects as well as 2-dimensional. Very similar. So here's the circular polar array. You just select the object you want to copy around in a circle. And there's a couple different things. You can have a center point. Now for us, we kind of want an entire axis. So I'm going to use the Z-axis and actually type in the points just to make sure that this is correctly oriented. So I went from 0, 0, 0 to 0, 0, 1 and change this around to only 4 of those guys. Don't want to overdo it. So you can set all of the properties for your array up there, and there we have it. We've got our nice new bracket for our closet. Okay, so we're finishing up here. The last little bit, our bolt is not quite finished, and this is the hardest piece, so I saved it for last. What we're going to use is helix and the subtract command and a path extrude. That little helix tool, this is what we're going to use to make the thread. He's under the drawing tools. And take a look at that description. There's quite a lot to define on him. Then we're going to use sweep, and this is going to carve out the threads on our bolt. This is a little bit tricky. You might have to try this out a couple times. come back to 2D wireframe so you can see everything going on here, and start up that helix command. Follow what the command line asks you to do. Specify center point, and then the base radius, and then the top radius. You can have a tapered helix if you want. So you have to specify that radius twice, and then you tell it the height. You can also tell it the number of turns. See everything in the square brackets, all the things you can define about this thing. Okay, so here's the height, the two radiuses, so we're just going straight up and down. Right now it's just a line though, and we want to turn that line into threads. So the next thing we're going to do is create the cross section for our thread. That's going to be a path for our path extrude. I'm just going to use a circle for our threads, but first we have to move our user coordinate system to the end of our path. The 2D drawings only happen on the XY plane, so we need to move our user coordinate system so that it's centered at the end of that helix, and we also want something that's kind of at 90 degrees to how we want to extrude it. So we have to be kind of careful of how we're orienting our coordinate system. So I've got the end of that helix. Okay, let's just see if this is oriented correctly. Nope. See how it's the XZ plane? We need that to be the XY plane. So I'm going to open up user coordinate system again, specify origin. If you hit W, that will take it back to where it was originally. And this time make sure you're pulling the X and the Y axis so that that plane is going to be perpendicular to the helix. Okay, so now we have the XY plane perpendicular to the path we want to extrude on, and I'm just going to draw a circle here, centering the circle at the end of the path that we want to extrude on, and I want to make this circle half of the distance between those threads. You might want to reorient it so you can really tell where the halfway point is, and you should probably know the distance between threads. Distance between threads here is 1. I'm not going to set it to exactly 0.5 because it would overlap, so just a little bit bumped smaller than 0.5. If it intersects itself, it will not do this path extrude. Okay, sweet. We're going to select first the cross section, first that circle, and next we'll grab that helix. So sweep, grab the circle, and next grab the path. Now this might fight you. You're going to have to sit here and wait for a little bit, so be patient. If your computer freezes up, it didn't die, go read a book or something, especially if you have a very tight thread. It might take a while for this command to run. Okay, so now we have a big fat circle. That doesn't look like a thread. What we want to do is carve that away. I'm going to use the subtract command, and we're going to subtract the helix off of our cylinder. Subtract, and you're going to get the big object minus the small object. It's just like the equation. So select what you want to keep first, and then hit what you want to get rid of. So there we go. We subtracted that helix off of there, and that's starting to look like threads. And you can create all kinds of different thread patterns in here. Okay, you'll notice that this is still in 2 parts. That saved the top of our little bolt from getting that helix subtracted out of it, and I'm going to leave it in 2 parts for a little bit longer. What we're going to do now is shave off the corners of our bolt. So we're going back to 2D wireframe. We're going to use a cone and the intersect command to do this. Now for the cone, we need a center point, and we've just destroyed our center point with that helix command. So what we're going to have to do, I'm going to make a little construction line over here to get that center point back. Start up the line command. If you hover over the circle, it'll allow you to grab the center of what used to be the center of our cylinder there. Okay, so now we have a spot where we can start up that cone command, but we need to move our UCS so that we have the XY plane where it needs to be to orient our cone correctly. User coordinate system, UCS, enter. Let's zoom in on here and try and get him on our center point. Sometimes you have to draw a little line so you can grab a hold of where you want to be. I've got my ortho snap on so that it will line up perpendicular with where we need it to be. Okay, so now we have our XY plane sitting on the top of the cap, and that's going to let us orient our cone correctly. Switch it over to a solid view, start up the cone command, and our coordinate system is up there, so now I can define the center as 0, 0, 0, because that's where we've moved our coordinate system. Define the base so that it's just a little bit larger than that hexagon, and then I'm going to pull it so that the little corners we want to carve off are sticking out. So anything that's not overlapping, we're going to get rid of with the intersect command. So this is going to carve away all of those little corners and make it look like a real bolt. Okay, so this is the intersect command, and this is a unique command that I don't think other CAD softwares has, but it's very useful. What we're going to do is select both pieces, and it's only keeping where they intersect. So see how it just carved off the edge of this thing. So that's a really nice command that I wish other software packages had. The next little piece that we're going to make is this bolt that's going to match the thread we had on there earlier. There's just a little sneak peek so you get the idea of what we're going for. Start by typing copy, C-O-P-Y, enter. We're going to copy each of these objects, select, enter, base point 0, 0, 0, and I'm going to move it over 10, 10, 0, 0, enter. Okay, so now we have a second bolt, so we don't have to worry about destroying the first one. Let's go ahead and move our coordinate system over to our new bolt as well. UCS. Just get lots of practice in for moving that coordinate system around. So we're going to move him just to the center. I'll move him over onto the corner here. That'll help us with our mirror image. Okay, so we have our coordinate system moved over, and I want to kind of make two halves of this for our bolt. So I'm using the mirror command here. I made another one, and now I'm going to use the 3D rotate. It's actually a lot faster to type commands into the command line than to poke around in the ribbon and try and find them up there. So as you get better at this, you'll get used to just typing them into the command line instead of finding them in the ribbon. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this over, find just the right axis here. It's going to be a little bit tricky. Tell you what, I'm actually going to choose a different base point for this thing. I'm going to grab the center. See that little triangle? That tells us it's the center. And it's still not lining up perfectly because of those strange angles, but that's okay. We can still move it into shape. Okay, so I'm just going to rotate it over like flipping a pancake, 180 degrees around that axis, and then 3D move it into place so that one of these guys is right on top of the other one. This will get you a really good practice in moving things around and rotating objects. So play around with all of those moving commands. Okay, so I'm going to pull it over and line up my corners with one another. And trust your snapping tools. Yay, it actually lined up. Now that they're together, let's keep them together. I'm going to use that union command, U-N-I-O-N, enter, and just the bottom two, not the threaded part, just the bolt. I'm going to move that threaded chunk actually down into the bolt. So 3D move, and I'm grabbing the Z-axis and just pulling it down so that the threads are inside the bolt. And you guessed it, the next thing we're going to do is the subtract command. Subtract object, we want to keep the bolt, so that's what we select first, minus the threads. So we just subtracted the threads out of the middle of that thing so that bolt will fit perfectly onto our little screw. Okay, this turned into kind of a long video, but hopefully I went slow enough that you can keep up with it, and you can always change the speed of these things if you want. There's step-by-step screenshots in the notes that might be better than watching a video, might be a little bit less fuzzy, but hope that helped you get the main gist of it, and I think that takes you through quite a lot of those 3D tools. So play around with it, try and have fun, and hopefully you won't get too frustrated. The first time through these things, it is quite hard. So just have some patience with yourself and let me know where you're getting stuck. We'll see you next time.